So today is a very special treat. We have a corporate venturing veteran with us, Barbara Berger from Chevron Technology Ventures. She will tell us about a very long job title, but more importantly, what she's planning after a graduation, and she will explain what she means by graduation, but also how she got into the journey of corporate venturing. So Barbara, if you don't mind taking maybe 5-10 minutes to share your journey into corporate venturing.
Okay, well, thank you for the invitation to speak. And can I first just start a little bit about me?
Yes, please.
And then, so you know, the way I describe myself, I'm a middle child of a large family. And so that comes out in a lot of things I do. You know, my parents were community builders. So everything they did was about building community. They were always adding people to their lives, and dad is gone, but mom is still doing that. And one of them was a planner, and one of them is a planner, mom, and dad was always adding stuff to his plate, including, you know, the day he had a stroke, he just had a lot of unfinished work. So I am the product of that DNA. You know, a three-coaster. So I grew up in the East Coast, went to the West Coast for graduate school, and started working for Chevron at that point. And as they say in Houston, I am on my second rodeo on this coast. You know, sort of tying it to Chevron and then into corporate venture, you know, I studied science and history as an undergraduate, and kind of those two sides of my brain, I guess, a little bit. Was always an athlete, and of course liked music lifelong on that. I went to Caltech and got a PhD, and then I joined Chevron a long time ago. And I started in technology, and then I grew up through Chevron running businesses, mostly that had a lot of international flavor to them. And I realized, you know, I like connecting with people. I like understanding how businesses work and like how money gets made. And I guess one example was I lived in London, and I was running a lubricants business. And we closed the books on 43 countries every month. And so I was trying to figure out, you know, what does the lubricants business look like in Uganda, and comparing that to Belgium. And it was really interesting because the business models were different, the markets were different, and everything. So it gave me a really good understanding of, you know, the diversity of businesses, and when it translates down to how organizations interact with customers and suppliers and ultimately make some money. In 2013, I got asked to run the Tech Ventures company in Chevron, and I have since added to my title, just making it very difficult for people to introduce me. You know, I still run Technology Ventures, but Vice President of Innovation as well. And it really reflects how Chevron thinks about the role that Tech Ventures plays in the company, which is it's about accessing external innovation, and it's the external innovation not that come from our current suppliers and incumbent suppliers, but these suppliers that have no past, and they're building a future. So it's a unique set of innovators, but it's one thing to you know, invest in those companies and have a relationship, but if you don't ever do anything with them beyond Tech Ventures, you know, Chevron really misses out. So spending a lot of time figuring out how do you integrate into the company, whether it's through use of the technology, whether it's through the learnings we have, whether it's through the practices that the startups are doing in terms of how they're running their business. So it's quite a holistic view. So I'll leave it at that. And I've been running the organization for about 8 years. It's probably the best job in Chevron, and maybe through our conversation you'll find out why.
I actually really like when you finish with "it's the best job at Chevron," and I can probably sense why. So, but let me start from your introduction, because I think you're the first that I interview that have science and history, and I really like when people have very wide interest. And so I want to hear from you what you think it brought to you in terms of leading this open innovation activities, because it's not just a corporate venturing, but you're also the VP of innovation. How much of the science and history brought to you?
Sure. And along the way, I got an MBA in finance. So that even shows you a little bit more that it's all mixed up there. So I think a couple of things, and I reflect back on, why was I interested in both science and history? First of all, I love to read. You can tell a little bit by the bookshelves. And I enjoyed learning about places around the world and everything. I didn't travel a lot when I was a kid, but I read an awful lot about a lot of places. So I think, so when I did it, it was, Nicolas, it was really about, I wanted to be able to read something other than chemistry and physics books, And I think it was almost as simple as that. As I reflected through my career and everything, obviously chemistry got me the job, got me in the door, but how businesses work, how countries work and everything, history, it obviously teaches us a lot of lessons. And so I continue to come back that is probably what has shaped me in terms of how I run an organization or a business. And when you think about the job that I have, people think we invest in technology. We invest in companies, and those companies are composed of people and relationships. And in fact, three of our decision criteria around investment really have to do with the team. One is the team, one is the CEO, and one is the board. And so it really reflects that, I'm not a hard facts person that, because the world doesn't quite run like that. Everything is conducted through people and so forth. And history is just telling us, the lessons of yesterday.
Very nice. You haven't used the word, but I'm assuming there's a lot of curiosity. And can you tell us how much curiosity plays into you meeting entrepreneurs and startups, and maybe having an open mind versus, like you said, having these boxes in mind?
Yeah. It is community. The entrepreneur rarely is, working in isolation, because they need the support, they need to bounce ideas off, they need to learn from others. And so building these communities, it's what incubators and accelerators do. And we want to be in the mix. And we want to be in the mix because we, when they're looking for funding, when they're looking for a scaling partner, when they're trying to get feedback on their whatever it is that they're developing, we want to be there. So it is about community. And then I think, from a venture investment standpoint, for a wide variety of reasons, we invest as syndicates. So we do not buy, we invest and we take a minority position. And the other investors around the table are really important. If they all look like us, and I don't mean from a visible diversity, but if they all bring the same attributes, we're missing something. So we, really appreciate and work hard to make sure that we have a wide variety of co-investors, from other corporates in different sectors, to financials, to sovereign wealth, to high net worth. We all work different skill sets other than the check that we wrote.
I really like what you said about the syndicate and the diversity of the investors. We're going to announce next week a green hydrogen electrolyzer investment where we build a syndicate, and we looked at someone who can bring a go-to-market, someone who can bring technology support, and we try to really find a very nice wide range. Could you give your own example of building a syndicate and how you are very careful about how you craft the syndicate?
Yeah, well, I mean, some of that is actually crafted, and some of it is probably a bit serendipitous. But you do want that. You want, a mix of the financial with the strategics, and strategics from a supplier standpoint, customer standpoint. So you want all of that, but you also want investors that understand that they're there to work together to help grow that business. In other words, they're not going to control and influence, and it's not just for them. And if they provide too much support, let's just say they overwhelm the startup, they can actually kind of stifle its growth. And so that balancing act is really important. We feel like we've done a pretty good job of that throughout our 22 years, but we also want to co-invest with investors that understand that balancing act. We want to help, but we don't want to control or push in a certain direction, because it may not be the right thing for the startup.
Yeah, I think it's a golden nugget, and I want to triple click on this one, because it could be very tempting for us to think that we know better and we could actually tell them where to go because it looks much more promising, yet we should not do that. So could you give reasons why it's so important not to try to direct and to control, but actually to support?
Well, the whole reason for corporate venture is to get outside of your bubble. And so that, first of all, you have to understand you're in a bubble. And second, you have to appreciate and the benefits of getting outside. And it starts with understanding that you don't know everything. And in fact, you're doing this to learn. And I'm frequently reminded that people say, well, you can help the startup. What I want everyone to know is they help us as much as we help them. They help us with seeing a world outside of the world we operate in every day. And that, I think, is just one of the natural attributes of being an incumbent, is you know the business of your company really well. What you don't know is what it looks like from the outside, because by definition, you're on the inside. So I think the more open you are and, to learning, to imagining the possibilities, and as much as possible to see things from where the entrepreneur is, both of you will benefit. And Chevron Technology Ventures was set up explicitly for that. That objective was to get outside of the bubble, if you will.
I think you really described well the why of the inside the bubble, and you want to learn. And I like the fact that actually you're saying the value is a lot from the entrepreneurs and investment. I think it's really well described. Now, you're VP of Innovation as well as the head of the CVC. Is it not difficult to have two hats? Because in a way, you need very different disciplines for both. I can see the overlap, but I can also see the challenges.
So sometimes when you have two hats, it's the best, because you can just say, well, that's what I'm doing for this or that. But, seriously, after understanding the Tech Ventures role and everything, and by the way, I have like the most amazing team. So my job is to make them happy and support them, but they're the ones who progress the opportunities, let's be clear. But what we learn, and it's not just what we learn about technology, we learn also how the whole innovation process works when you are not encumbered by today's business. Now, the incumbent has, we have a long track record, 140 years for Chevron, but every day we have to run today's business and think about tomorrow. The startup doesn't have that. And so they approach things in a different way. Watching them and learning from them also gives us ideas on how we can change the incumbent. Not all of them work, but we have a bit of an incubator for trying different things inside of Tech Ventures, and then also bringing them from our organization to the broader organization. very helpful. We're an incumbent, but we also understand, business isn't static, the world isn't static. Learning from those who don't have that historical baggage, if you will. I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but maybe the conforms of that, very helpful. So, that's kind of how I approach it. And we have a credo in Tech Ventures, which is we do no harm. I would say we do no harm to the startup. We do no harm to Chevron. Doesn't mean we don't try to change it, but we change it with a North Star that we're doing, we're trying to make it better.
So I want to jump on the do no harm because it's something I have in my mind, especially when we talk about diversity and inclusion. And there are a lot of initiatives and discussions about our role as a VC or CVC to promote that to our portfolio companies. And I find that depending on where they are in their stage, early stage versus late stage, the spectrum of what you can recommend and do is very different. And sometimes taking too strong a stance could actually do harm. And so I wanted to have maybe a granular review from you about how to think about this, especially in terms of doing no harm and yet bringing value to the community and to the ecosystem.
Well, let me take a stab at that. I think there's a number of things we need to do. It's very clear that we have a lot of issues with equity around the world, right? And we're not going to solve all of them. But in the world that we work in, which is energy innovation, and we're a corporate venture organization, when we look inside our company, when we look to the startups, and when we look at the other co-investors, we've got work to do. We said diversity around the table from an investor standpoint is important. Diversity within a team is important. And so we're guided by how Chevron's thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but then we translate that to the business that we're in and what can we do. And so, we're going to invest in companies that meet our criteria. And we're going to try to make our aperture as wide as possible and really challenge ourselves on the objectivity of our criteria. But we also are going to, and we get some diversity that way, just by the definition. But we're also going to do very intentional things to increase access. So, for example, participating in funds that have a predetermined criteria around a certain type of founder. And because we know that access is not a totally objective criteria in this world, and it starts very early. And so, so that's in parallel to what we're doing is also how do you just increase the amount of deal flow that ultimately, venture investors in a, early, late, mid, late series will have for consideration. So we're trying to, front end load, if you will, and we're supporting organizations or funds that have that as a focus and have the, I think the capability to do it right.
Yeah.
Along the way, we're trying to ensure that we have a very inclusive work, location and work and organization, and support the efforts of incubators and accelerators, principally around the country, and broader than that, for their efforts. So have supported many of their events and things like that in that area.
Very nice. Actually, it's an interesting idea to use funds for increased access, especially to entrepreneurs that otherwise may not find it easy to get to you. Is that the primary reasons for you to think about investing in funds, or do you have also other reasons for investing in funds?
Yeah, no, good question. So when Tech Ventures started out, they started out investing in funds, and I wasn't there. I'm the fourth president, but they started out investing in funds. And as I understand it, it was because they wanted to learn from a fund manager, which actually is pretty smart.
Yeah.
And over time, they found the limitation to funds that way was that if what you want to do is to try to connect to the end company, you're one step removed. And so they started to gradually invest in directly into companies. And within the last 5 years or so, we've continued and increased the amount of direct investments we've done. But there's some places where we don't have as easy way to access the direct companies. And so can we invest in funds that are investing there? So we don't view it as an either or, we view it as complementary. And we've invested in a number of funds to try to do a specific objective that we feel like we're not getting there from a direct funds.
Very nice. And I can see how learning the job with other fund managers is really important. I want to ask, because indeed you were not the first president, you were actually the fourth president of the CVC. What does that, well, first, how did you manage to get in the job? How did you convince you were the right profile? Because I think many people in the audience would want to know, how do you get into the place in the first place? But also, what did it mean for you in terms of making your mark and continuing what was good and maybe adding on top?
Sure. So on the first question, I'll probably disappoint the audience. Because I was selected for the job rather than me selecting the job.
Okay.
But when and I've told this story before, when I was offered the job, I went to some of the people that were on the selection team at the time and said, in Chevron, groups of people make personnel decisions. And I asked them, so why me? And one of the best answers I got was that I had demonstrated a very good ability to say both yes and no, and that would be required in this job. And I thought a lot about that because, in fact, there are more good opportunities to progress, and there's, in addition to the good opportunities, you get thrown lots of opportunities. So the ability to filter things and understand what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to is really important. So, so when I came in, I'll tell you, I moved to Houston and oil was over $100 a barrel. This place was on fire. I mean, it was go, go, go. So I set out to learn, so how does Tech Ventures help Chevron in a high oil price, low oil price? I said, well, what does Chevron do beyond oil and gas? And how does Chevron think about an energy transition of our oil and gas business? And so I was in a really good place to be able to think about the future. And we could do, since we're working with this sort of the edge of innovation and entrepreneurs that were thinking along those lines, we could do a lot of experiments, if you will. We could test some things. They were options plays, and very proud of the journey that Chevron's gone on. And last year we set up Chevron New Energies, which really takes some of that fundamental work and says, now Chevron's ready to scale some of these lower carbon businesses. So, I think my mark was to think very holistic, to have my North Star not be Chevron Technologies Ventures, but my North Star very much be Chevron, and always be thinking about, so how does this, how does this connect to Chevron? And my employees are probably very tired of one of the key questions I ask. Can you remind me again? But it gets us thinking, and it's a very broad question because the answer can be, we care about it for lots of different reasons.
So Barbara, I want to double click on what you said about being good at saying yes and good at saying no. And I feel like this is actually so important, especially to entrepreneurs, to say no the right way. I actually wrote a Medium post about entrepreneurs deserves a better no. Could you really share your views about how to say no to entrepreneurs and what others in the community should really think about?
Well, I'll try, right? And our whole process, we do investment, use, and strategy, and it's a pipeline, right? So it starts with a very wide aperture and gets narrowed down. So there's places along that pipeline to say yes and no. But in terms of the engagement with the entrepreneur, I mean, it starts out with being responsive. It starts out with being clear on what we want, and what we're looking for. It also, we do say we'll take a look at something, but once we say that, that's actually a commitment. And so, that's a part of a culture, which is, if you storm my inbox with, cold call everything, I don't have an obligation to answer all of those, right? But if I tell you I'm going to look at it, then, or I'm going to have the team look at it, because honestly, I have an amazing team who do most all of the work, and but then we have an obligation back. So I think responsiveness, velocity, and then when if it doesn't fit our profile, being able to tell people why. I guess that's actually just like being sort of above board and honest with people. So we reinforce that, and it means that we all process a lot of communication back and forth. But I think that's what we do at the front end. I think the other piece is that we tell entrepreneurs, because we work for a really large company, if you want to go out and just work in another part of the company and not really involve us, I mean, knock yourself out. We can't help you if you don't come and engage with us. If you continue to, I don't know what the expression is, spray and pray, where you cover all of Chevron with stuff, again, we can't help you. But if you meet us halfway, you understand how we do our work, and we put a little trust in you, you put a little trust in us. I think those are just the building blocks of a relationship. And that's what we've tried to build our processes around.
Very nice. Tell me more about building your process around, because at high level, I love everything you said, but how do you build the process to deliver on that?
So we have, I've bragged about my team.
I can tell you're very.
And by the way, there's Chevron's team, so keep your hands off. But so the team members build, and create an opportunity, and so they have to be looking outside. They're also looking at, what Chevron needs in the future, right? You don't fall in love with the company and then try to find a place to stick it. You start with, our understanding of our company now and where we're going and everything. But there's some creativity in building that opportunity, and it's sort of your thesis on why getting involved in this particular company will improve that. So they do a lot of that work, and they need to understand the context around that company, because rarely is there one company trying to solve a problem. If there is only one company trying to solve a problem, it's either not a very important problem, or we're in trouble, because we need lots of different approaches to a problem. When they get it to a certain point, we have our first gate, and the employees bring it forward, and the team weighs in on it. And people that know that domain really well and people that don't know that domain really well, because they'll ask different kinds of questions, they'll come from a different perspective, and we will collectively say, so do we want to progress this? We'll do all of that before we ask you to see the confidential stuff. We'll do all of it before we tie up our lawyers. Because at that point, we aren't seeing, can you get a deal done? At that point, you're saying, does this thing fit? Is it investable according to our criteria and so forth? And then once we go through that, and we build out a due diligence plan. Then they move forward on that. And it's very rare we would stop it after that. Our employees might, because they find they can't get a deal done, or they find something in the due diligence that just will make this a difficult relationship. And so there are a couple of places along the lines where both the words yes and no are used, and we have used both.
Now, we talked about process. How about the KPIs? What it is that you measure to ensure that this vision is delivered?
Yeah, so some of it's quantitative and some's qualitative. And I like to think that the KPIs are proxies for achieving mission. They are not, you should not hardwire. So of course we look at how much activity you get through the various stages and how many ring the cash register at the end. And I mentioned that we do investment, we do use, we do strategy. And so we look at how much is going successfully through the pipeline, which allows you to have some failures, allows you to look at a lot of stuff. And we look at those things that are adding value to Chevron today. We look at, as well as those things that it's more qualitative. What are the strategic insights that are helping us think through the future? And so it's a mix of all of those things. And I guess the one other thing is that the goals for the team, or the commitments for the team, are such that no one person can do their work in isolation. And that's just the middle child in me coming out that says, guess what? It's going to take all of us. And so we will, we'll have a successful year because of all of us, not just because of any one person.
Very nice. And I think it will be a comfort to the audience that for a CVC that's been going on for more than 20 years and a decade with you, you still have these KPIs that have to be flexible and both not driving the wrong behaviors. You want this to be the outcome of good behaviors.
Yeah. We want the companies to be successful. We want to have a good return on Chevron's investment. But the return is not just the monetary return on the capital we put in. It's the learnings, it's using the technology, it's advancing our learning in a certain space so that we can adopt the technology faster if that's why we've invested. And so we can get too hung up on the numerical number that you would have if you were strictly a financial, and that will change what it is our employees scout for. And so we have to start with the North Star is, Chevron, and how we're thinking about, adding value today and in the future. And I think we get the right blend, and it's a portfolio. So we get things that have tremendous multiples when they have a liquidity event, and we also get things that are really tough. They're tough to develop. They're tough to scale. It's a hard road. But they're important things for our industry, and so we need to support them.
And is that when you would compromise a little on the financial expectations if you see something that could have really big strategic value or big impact into the ecosystem?
So we set out our financial expectations with the first initial investment. I don't think any of them ever deliver exactly what we put in there, right? I mean, that's not the game of venture. So we always want them all to be successful. A capitally intensive technology is tough. We need them in our businesses. I think that is one of the areas where corporate venture really plays a good role, because we see the use for the stuff, because frequently it's in our own operations. And so we wouldn't invest in something that wouldn't make money because the company won't be there. So, again, we're not changing Chevron's bottom line by the return on the return on that initial investment. These are options plays. But we want them to be successful, and we'll invest in things we think will be successful.
Very nice. I can see you love your job, you love your team, you love the impact you do, and you describe this as the best job in Chevron. But I don't believe this is luck. I'm sure that you are doing things to make it the best job. Can you describe, maybe for people who are thinking about leading a CVC or creating a CVC, how can they ensure to design it in a way that it becomes the best job ever?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you from where I sit, and I don't have all the answers. I'm still learning, but I'm very fortunate. I work for a company where the CEOs, and I've worked in this job, I've worked for 2 CEOs, had the vision and foresight and understanding of what a corporate venture organization could do for the company. It does take senior leadership support, because you are, I have a big title, but you could shorten it to say chief disruptor. I mean, the one thing I will not make Chevron feel happy about is the status quo, right? And that's not my job. I can respect the people that are producing every day but that's not the job I've been asked to do. So I've been asked to change things. So partly is understanding that mindset. Building relationships inside the company and external to the company, having people understand why it is you're doing what you're doing, particularly when you're investing in something that is it looks like a big, bad, ugly threat to your current business, but you have a vision for where the threats are, but also where the opportunities for Chevron are, and being able to articulate that. So those are some relationship things, and then hire the best people you can. And most of our folks have come from inside of Chevron, so they know the business. We know them before we hire them, because we're networking inside the company to find those people that are innately curious and always thinking about, well, what about this, maybe this. It's not an easy job, but they're passionate and they want in. And so hire good people. And then I said my job is to keep them happy, but create an opportunity where they can bring forward good ideas and provide a little cover so that they get a chance to nurture those ideas. I think, it's not perfect, but I think all in all, that makes an organization where they don't come in to do a job. Yep. They're on a mission.
Yeah.
And when you can work with people that are mission based, and mission based for the company you work for, and the company you work for more than half your life, that's just a great work environment to have.
So I'm going to touch on recruitment and team. But first, I have to say, I love everything you said, but I love the concept of chief ReDisruption. And if you think about the role that you've described, it's about identifying the disruptions that are coming. It's just that they're not so visible today. And one of the interviews I had before, someone talked about a tsunami early signal detection. So it's better to have a chief disruption that tells about the disruption that's coming than waiting, assuming that you're in your bubble and nothing will happen.
I think that's true, but I think so there's things out there on the horizon. There's also things right out here now, but they're outside of your bubble and you don't see them. And they're both things that could clean our clocks as a company and our businesses, but they're also things out there that if you knew how to use them, you would, improve your operations, improve your safety, make you a more reliable company. So it's not just the things out there, it's also the things that are kind of outside of your peripheral vision. And that's what we need to work on. So some things are all ready to get out in the field. Some things are still, there's still very high technical risks. So we're not going to take it out in the field until we can think through how to de-risk it. I think both of those are definitely within kind of the remit of the organization.
Very nice. Part of this is also access to the C-suite and the CEO. How important do you think it is for the president of the CVC to report directly to the CEO versus other functions?
So I report to the CTO.
CTO.
I know the CEO. When you've worked for a company more than half your life, you know a lot of people, right? And that is one of the wonderful benefits of working for an incumbent and having, I think it's an unusual thing right now. I worked 34 years with Chevron, but I can tell you when I got out of graduate school, it's not that I thought that I would work for Chevron for my whole career, but it wouldn't have been uncommon. And so, yes, developing relationships is really important. We threw an event in December, and I think it's a good example where there was like this this window in COVID where we could get people together, and we had, let's see if I get the numbers right, about 8 of our CEOs. We had about the same amount of co-investors and thought leaders. We had about 8 Chevron executives. And then we had the Sherpas, that was what we called ourselves, and what we did was basically curated a chance for them to talk directly to each other without any of us being a filter. And it was a 2-hour event, and it went really well. There was a bit of pitching. So our CEOs got to pitch for a couple of minutes, and then there was networking, and then another one pitched. And we gave one CEO, that would be the CEO of Chevron, 4 minutes because he had a little bit bigger business. But I think that for me was an example of the relationships we have, both external and internal, and having the incumbent companies and the startups be able to have these just incredible conversations and see the opportunities to work together. To me, that was like, okay, that's the masterpiece that we've been trying to work, and we're seeing it live tonight. So it was a very happy night for the team, and everybody was pumped, the executives as well as the CEOs.
Very nice. As you graduate to your next step of your journey, what is a key advice you're going to give to the person taking over?
Yeah, and I've been doing that, right? So, when you're running an organization and, so you're the CEO of the organization, you have to figure out, so really what C's are you going to focus on? And the first one is a C, and that's culture. We don't run an asset. We don't manage a product line. We are the sum total of our ideas and creativity and our absolute tenacity to get things done. And so creating that culture. And while the culture is owned by everybody, obviously the leader sets a tone of that. And so I think that's one. Relationships are so important. Having my own relationships, but also encouraging everybody in the organization to have them. The world's changing, the needs of the energy system are changing. And so we, as a corporation and as a company and even individuals, will work with counterparties that we've never worked with before. But if you have a common goal, you're going to be able to find things to do. So I think relationships and culture. I know a lot about the domain that my team is progressing, and I guess that comes from I'm the chief learning officer too, and being willing to show the team that every day I learn and there's still a lot more to do. So a lot of those don't sound like hard financial measures that you would have when you are running an organization that's in operations and so forth. The hard numbers, the financials and stuff like that, that's in there and everything, but that's not the big deal of this organization. It's not the potential. So those are some of the things that I've shared. As you can imagine, it's a little bewildering to come into such a thing where it's a little different than if you were running operations. But I have confidence in the team, and I have confidence in my successor. Very
nice. I like the way you always circle back to the learning and keep learning and looking beyond the bubble. And also I can see across the full interview how important people are. So let's move to the recruitment, because clearly you cannot recruit thousands of people. You're going to have a small team. And so each people you recruit really, really matters. Can you tell us how you recruit and how you think about internal recruitment versus external? What was your guidelines?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we do most of the recruiting internal, but we for specific positions, we've done external. So internal, Chevron has this big machine that's a bit of a matchmaking, matching the jobs to the disciplines and so forth. So we try to live within that, but we don't work. It doesn't work that well for us. Because you can look at someone's job experience, you can even look at what their college degrees are and everything, and that tells you something, but it doesn't tell you enough about what drives them. What are you curious about? What are you trying to learn about? If people don't have to have the right answers for all this, but they have to, this has to get them thinking, right? And so it's a thinking person's game. If they come from the operations, what ideas do they have about where innovation is needed? They have to have a kind of imagine the possibility, improvement mentality. Most of, I would say, the successful folks can deal with ambiguity. When you are going out beyond where the company is right now, every once in a while you want to look back and make sure they're there, but you got to keep going out. So that takes confidence. It takes a willingness to not have everything be black and white and still be able to flourish and be productive in that. So, a lot of that we do, it's word of mouth. It's the way we conduct ourselves. We have inside of the company something called the Coalition of the Willing, which is who are those people out in the enterprise that are helping us, whether it's a trial or helping us with a due diligence and so forth, who are really excited about the opportunity to bring new innovation into our operations. They can help us with word of mouth. Some of them want to be part of the team. And so, yeah, it's definitely that type of thing rather than please give me 100 resumes and I'll sort through and find the 25 that are best suited. It doesn't work that way.
Let me ask a question, which maybe I'm partial, but if someone is really proactive reaching out to you to join your team, not through the matchmaking that's organized by your company, but finding ways to keep adding value, does that kind of influence your choice?
From an internal perspective?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
For sure, because again, the way I've described these things, it's not based on you got the highest GPA in mechanical engineering in said university. That doesn't tell me whether or not when you are confounded by a tough problem, whether you're going to be able to get out there, find all the innovators that are working in that space, develop the trust with them, and bring forward the one that you think is best. I mean, there's a lot of both, sort of behavioral behavioral aspects to that, as well as knowing the domain. I mean, you have to have, technical chops in these jobs, right? But that isn't the limit of what you have. So, and if they can prove that they understand the model, and by being helpful, by being part of a project beforehand, the on-ramp will be smoother. And we want people to succeed in these jobs. The on-ramp is always steep.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't come in knowing how to do. I didn't know how to do this.
Yeah.
We're all newbies, if you will, when you come in. But if you get a sense that on-ramp will be, they will be more successful at navigating it. yeah, they're going to get a leg up.
Yeah, actually, the ramp is not just the learning, but some unlearning from things you've learned in the past that may not apply.
Oh, yes, you do need to extricate some practices. That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So in our last 5 minutes, I want to focus on what you are hopeful for the corporate venturing ecosystem and what you think we should do better as an industry.
Mm-hmm. So, the number of corporate venture organizations is growing by leaps and bounds. I think I heard a statistic that, half of the corporate ventures did their first deal in the last 12 months.
That was my
just amazing. Yeah, just amazing given COVID and everything that this trend has, such an upward slope. What it says is that corporations understand the need for change. What it says is that they understand, maybe in their own words, that they're in a bubble. And that, so I think all of those things are positive. So it can be done right, or it cannot be done right. And so we have always been willing to share how we do what we do, because having corporate venture organizations out there that don't know how to do it right is just damaging for all of us.
All of it.
And so I think the piece that I would encourage people to do is to not think of it just as the strict transactional financial investment. You are strategic. I think that's why your company wants a corporate venture form. And so really take that strategy out for a spin and think through, so how do I inform corporate strategy? Well, actually, you need to get close to the people that are developing corporate strategy and talk to them, and sometimes as organizations and events come together where all the corporate ventures come together, it has been mainly focused on the deal. And it hasn't been focused on this integration back into the corporate. The corporate was a funder, but that was it. And I think that misses a lot of the value. Now, I think organizations are getting savvy to this, is how do I then I've got this on-ramp into the company. How do I get the on-ramp into the into the mothership? And I think there's more we can do to talk through how the practice is for that.
Very nice. And now in the energy space, just to finish the interview, what are you most hopeful about in the next 5 years?
So the challenges of energy are great, and they matter. Yeah. I mean, I would take any young person, bright, coming up, I'd try to convince you to go into energy. Try doing anything without energy. So the demands for the energy system are very high, and we're frequently disappointed, right? It's not reliable. In many parts of the world, it's not accessible, it's not affordable, and it's got a carbon footprint that's not sustainable. So trying to solve all of those, it's going to take a lot of money, a lot of talent, a lot of innovation, and then a lot of courage to deploy the technologies and undergo that change. So leadership change is really important. I'm very optimistic that we are on the right track. Things are accelerating. They've been accelerated through COVID, and some of that is through just so much support for the entrepreneurs in this area, but also this understanding that we're going to have to collaborate and partner. So that I think that the caution point or watch point is, if we couldn't have done it yesterday, we better do it today. So our industry has historically not moved fast. We had a saying, there's always time to do it right. And from a safety and execution standpoint, that's absolutely right, because we work in a high risk environment. But putting off change because we don't think it needs to happen, because we're scared, because we're this, we're that. We're going to have to find a way through that. So I think the pace of impact and pace of change has to pick up.
I love it. And I think I'm going to invite you to Energy Week 2022 when we set it. So thank you, Barbara. You've been very generous with insights and sharing your journey. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. And any feedback, let me know.
Definitively. I'll make sure that we give the links so that people can reach out easily to you. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.